Next story I wanted to talk about is about Ginni Thomas. This is a little bit of an older story, but I feel like I want to cover it because some new information just came out. If you're unfamiliar, Ginni Thomas, or Virginia Thomas, is the wife of Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice. The reason I'm talking about her right now is because, as it turns out, she's part of a cult. And not only is she part of a cult now, but she was part of a cult before. Who else but Stephen Hassan helped her get out of the cult? None other than the writer of the Bite Model, the author of the Bite Model. So I wanted to kind of go through what she's dealing with right now, why I say she's currently in a cult, and then we're going to talk about her past experience with the cult. I have a video, an old video of Ginni Thomas from like 1989. We'll take a look at it in a second, and I'll explain more. Let's just take a look at this New York Times article about Ginni Thomas for the moment, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. The title is Texts Show Ginni Thomas's Embrace of Conspiracy Theories. It was written by Danny Hakim, Joe Becker, and Alan Fewer, I think. Written on March 26, 2022. 2 days after the 2020 election, Virginia Thomas, the wife of Justice Clarence Thomas, texted an old friend, Mark Meadows, the chief of staff to President Donald J. Trump. She sent messages that had been making the rounds on pro-Trump sites where anger over the election echoed her own raw feelings, including this passage, quote, Biden crime family and ballot fraud co-conspirators, elected officials, bureaucrats, social media censorship mongers, fake stream media reporters, etc., are being arrested and detained for ballot fraud right now and over coming days and will be living in barges off Gitmo to face military tribunals for sedition. Do you know where that quote came from? Do you know which group embraced that quote, probably invented that quote? Those claims all came from none other than QAnon. Virginia Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, is a member of QAnon. She's parroting QAnon conspiracy theories, no joke, claiming that Biden crime family and ballot fraud co-conspirators are being arrested and detained for ballot fraud and will be living in barges off of Guantanamo Bay prison, basically, awaiting tribunals, military tribunals for sedition. That is so disconnected from reality, so unhinged from the reality that all the rest of us live in. And a Supreme Court Justice's wife is saying this stuff. Back to the article. Then she added of this fanciful, if chilling set of conspiracy theories, I hope this is true. She texted Mr. Meadows again the next day. Do not concede, she wrote. It takes time for the army who is gathering for his back. By the way, the army who is gathering for his back, the army that she's referring to is exactly what happened on January 6th. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of QAnon. If you're unfamiliar, I have some videos about it. I've talked about where it came from and what it is and all that stuff before. But QAnon believes that there's going to be a storm. There's going to be a great storm where everybody is detained and arrested who deserves to be, and they're all sent to jail, and everything is set right, and Trump is reinstated as president, and all that other junk. January 6th was supposed to be the storm. It was even organized by some QAnon members. It was supposed to be the storm, and it failed. This whole set of events with Ginni Thomas was pre-January 6th. This was like when the election was taking place, basically, right after the election. Do not concede. It takes time for the army who is gathering for his back. That's what she said. The messages were among a flurry of text traffic between Miss Thomas and Mr. Meadows that was revealed this past week, part of a trove of documents previously turned over to the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Ms. Thomas has openly opposed the committee and called for Republicans who serve on it to be expelled from the House Republican Conference. A hardline conservative activist, Ms. Thomas had long been viewed with suspicion by the Republican establishment, yet her influence had risen during the Trump administration, especially after Mr. Meadows, who, like Ms. Thomas, has roots in the Tea Party movement, became chief of staff. Now, an examination of her texts, woven together with recent revelations of the depth of her efforts to overturn the election, shows how firmly she was embedded in the conspiratorial fringe of far right-wing politics, even as the fringe was drawing ever closer to the center of Republican power. Would it surprise you to find out that Ginni Thomas was in a cult before this? She was in a cult before QAnon. a full-blown cult called Lifespring. Steven Hassan actually wrote about this whole thing on his Twitter account, so I wanted to read his big long tweet thread about it because it's actually really, really interesting, and he has a video connected to it too. Steven Hassan wrote the Bite model originally. He's one of the people who pioneered cult research. So check this out. I knew Ginni Thomas. Ginni Thomas was in a cult, the large group awareness training cult, Lifespring. We'll talk about what Lifespring was in a second. Here she is in 1989 speaking at an event I hosted for former members. Until today, almost no one has seen this video. Let's watch it. Former cult member support group, Kansas, 1989. Check this out. This is Ginni Thomas speaking here.
I think another issue that maybe hasn't been discussed is when you come away from a cult, you have to find a balance in your life as far as getting involved with fighting the cult or exposing it. And kind of the other angle is getting a sense of yourself and what was it that made you get into that group, and what open questions are there that still need to be answered. And I think I'm struggling with a balance between that. I want to expose Lifespring. I want to keep other people from going through that experience. But I also don't want to go overboard in that regard so that I'm not, so that I can reconnect with my own needs in a spiritual way, which I still haven't done. I still have so many questions, and I still have so many things that I want to talk to about with other people and find people who believe as I do and who are searching as I do. And so all those things that got me to Lifespring are still there. And I guess I struggle with not going overboard and fighting the cults, but I know that's important too.
You know the heartbreaking thing about this? I've been there. I know the exact feelings that she's experiencing right now. In fact, I'd be willing to bet a lot of people watching right now have been there. They know exactly how Ginni Thomas felt in that moment. You just found your way out of a destructive cult that did untold damage to your life, and you deeply need to heal from the experience that you just went through, and you don't know how to start. You don't know where to go. You don't know where to start to try to heal from what they did to you. We have all experienced something similar to this, I'd be willing to bet, at some point in our lives. And now, Ginni Thomas has found her way back to an even more extreme cult than Lifespring. An even more extreme cult. Lifespring, by the way, is dead and gone. It doesn't exist anymore, if you're curious. And we're going to talk about what that was in a second. But we have 15 more seconds in this, so watch.
Thank you. That was great. I just wanted to say that.
Whoa. Who is this Steven Hassan that we're looking at right now? What is going on with this dude's hair? This is absolutely on point. I am loving this. Call me Diglett, because I am digging this hard.
One comment was that when as you were saying, when
oh, dude, I love the hair. I love the hair so much. There is something deeply appealing about this.
One comment was that when as you were saying, when former members come out, part of you wants to help others, but part of you needs to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Part of you wants to help others, but part of you needs to take care of yourself. You come first. For the record, if you're struggling with this exact situation, which a lot of us have, you come first. Help others later. Leave helping others to those who can take on the emotional burden of dealing with it. That's Ginni Thomas. Ginni Thomas was a cult member who worked with Steven Hassan to get out of a cult and somehow found herself right back in it. That is heartbreaking. Let's keep reading the Steven Hassan tweet thread about it. As you'll probably notice, Ginni seems likable, and she was. After she left Lifespring, she got heavily involved in the movement to help former cult members exit cults. She also organized a cult awareness briefing for congressional staffers in the late 80s. Sadly, the people who helped deprogram Ginni were also apparently involved in right-wing causes. As is the case with so many former members, she was overly susceptible and went from one cult to another, the cult of Trump. Yeah, that happens a lot, especially with Jehovah's Witnesses when they exit. a lot of the time they will jump right into another that is really, really similar, like Mormonism or extreme Catholicism or something like that. It's very common. And unfortunately, there were a lot of right-wing cult deprogramming groups back then. The types of groups you could hire to kidnap a family member who was in a cult and tie them to a chair in a cabin in the woods for 3 days and deprogram them, which was illegal then, is illegal now, and was always and always will be unethical and immoral. You can't do it that way. You have to find some way of doing it while respecting their free will. You can't violate their free will in the name of restoring their free will. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, that's one of the big problems in the movement. There are right-wing pockets within the movement, far-right pockets, in fact, and obviously Ginni found one. For more on Ginni Thomas's time in the cult, her cult activism in the 80s, and her turn to right-wing causes, this Washington Post article from 1991 is surprisingly thorough. 1991, dude! This Washington Post article is from 1991, September 10th, 1991. The title is The Nominee's Soulmate. Who's afraid of Virginia Thomas? She's a soft-spoken, hard-working daughter of the heartland. This is written by Laura Blumenfeld, September 10th, 1991. Wow. A brainy Omaha lawyer who has scaled the sheetrock of professional Washington. A churchgoer who invites homeless people out to lunch. A good friend. A good family. Why the fuss over Mrs. Supreme Court nominee? Her critics see her as more than just a supportive spouse who will accompany her husband, Clerence, today as he begins Senate confirmation hearings. They see a woman with strong opinions on issues that are bound to come before the court. They find in her further grounds for opposing him. It's weirdly worded. Some women's rights activists are upset by her lobbying against such issues as comparable worth legislation and the Family Leave Act. Some religious rights groups are troubled by her anti-cult activities in light of her involvement with Lifespring, a controversial motivational group. Even the color of her skin is being used to determine the content of Clarence Thomas's character. The fact that she's white has drawn criticism from some blacks who see the marriage as evidence that Clarence Thomas has rejected his roots. My real question is, why me? Said Virginia Thomas when asked for an interview. She's declined to talk with reporters until after the hearings. She's not the story, she said, yet she's a compelling and persuasive figure. The one person Clarence Thomas really listens to is Virginia, said longtime friend Evan Kemp, chairman of Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. He depends on her for advice. That should be even more concerning to us, shouldn't it? Even back in 1991, Clarence Thomas depended on her for advice. And she's running around now, 2022, or 2021 anyways, parroting all these QAnon conspiracy theories. Unhinged stuff, dude. Unhinged stuff. So what is Lifespring? That's really the big question I'm sure is in a lot of people's minds right now. I figured we'd take a look at the Wikipedia page. To make a long story short, from my understanding, Lifespring doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be kind of a motivational self-help leadership course that you could take, but the courses never really ended. You'd keep pouring money in. You'd pay them like $100 or $200 or even $1,000 to take this leadership course where they'd teach you to be a leader, and you'd come out of it ready to take the next leadership course, and they would rise you through the ranks, and you'd pay more and more and more. It was a big scam, and they were effectively using mind control techniques to manipulate you into taking more of their courses. That's pretty much what it was. But let's read a few paragraphs here on Wikipedia. Lifespring was an American for-profit human potential organization. That's how they framed themselves. Human potential organization, founded in 1974 by John Hanley Sr., Robert White, Randy Revel, and Charlene Aframau. The organization encountered significant controversy in the 70s and 80s, with various academic articles criticizing Lifespring's training methods as deceptive and indirect techniques of persuasion and control, and allegations that Lifespring was a cult that used coercive methods to prevent members from leaving. These allegations were highlighted in a 1987 article in the Washington Post, as well as local television reporting in communities where Lifespring had significant presence. Before becoming defunct in the mid-90s, Lifespring claimed that it had trained more than 400,000 people through its 10 centers across the U.S. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. That's like, I think that's nearly as many Jehovah's Witnesses there are in the United States specifically. It's a lot of people, dude. About 10 times as many Scientologists as there are on paper, or as many as they admit to, I think. They faced a lot of lawsuits. They faced a lot of criticism, things like that. So that's a general idea of what Lifespring is. That's what Ginni Thomas escaped, and you got to, give her a round of applause for having come out of that situation and recognized it for what it is. It's just heartbreaking that she jumped right into another cult. Not long after that, QAnon, found herself in another cult, and her husband presumably continued taking her advice, as the Washington Post said back in the 90s. This is something we should be very concerned about. The fact that a Supreme Court justice's wife, and presumably the Supreme Court Justice himself, are sucked into an extremist far-right cult, QAnon. That's concerning.